Hello.
How are you, friend?
I'm good. I just realized I matched my sticky notes.
Oh, well, only for people watching this on YouTube and Sunside. Most of the people are listeners. They won't even notice. But if you
Yeah.
are seeing this on YouTube, just focus on the face.
Yeah. Yeah. One day I will get to painting the wall behind me in one of those two colors.
Did you notice that I painted the wall behind me?
I did. I was like, even when we talked, oh, there was a different call that we
Oh,
were on earlier this week. I was like, something looks different, but I couldn't
oh,
quite put my finger on it.
yeah. Okay, well, this is a lot of boring stuff for people who are listening. So let's move on to something that they will enjoy. Friendships. We're going to talk about adult friendships, making
Yeah.
friends, losing friends, or ending friendships. You
Yeah.
brought this topic up, so I'm wondering, is there a particular thing that maybe was sitting with you that made you feel like this feels like something to talk about today?
Yeah, I just when I was thinking about, potential topics that we could talk about in terms of what might interest people, like I had put a poll out on Instagram, and relationships was like the highest number, or had the highest number of votes. And it made me think about the kinds of relationships. Like, usually when people say relationships, they mean like romantic relationships, right? And so in my mind, I was like, what other kinds of relationships are there that we could talk about, that would be interesting to dive into? And I thought of friend breakups, because I came out later in life, like in my early 30s, and lost quite a few friends because of that. Friends that I had known for like over 10 years. And it wasn't like an immediate cutoff. It was like a gradual separation that, it, it just, you realize, I guess, like your values are no longer aligned, right? And people stop prioritizing, connecting with you. And it's, I, I don't know what's worse, like an immediate, like, oh, we can't be friends anymore, right? Like an immediate, like, rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing, or the gradual disconnection and ghosting that eventually happens. And then one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I haven't talked to that person in a few years. I don't know what they're up to or how their lives are. So anyway, that's where my mind went with that.
I have lots of thoughts on friendships, which is interesting because I think of myself as someone who doesn't have a lot of friends. But that's also because I have lots of thoughts about what makes friends friends. What makes something a friendship versus an
Mhm.
acquaintanceship
Right.
or, some other type of relationship. And I moved around a lot as a kid. I don't know if you did that, had that same experience or not, but I moved a lot. Never far, but just enough that I changed schools a lot. And so
Mhm.
that ended up meaning that I had a hard time establishing long-term friendships.
Mhm.
I sort of learned a lot about people leaving, right? Or things not sustaining. And so it was more
Mhm.
like friendship for a reason versus a season, or for a season versus a reason. I don't know, whatever that is, but where it was like I would have friends for a while and then I would move on because listen, I'm before the internet age. So it wasn't even like there were easy ways for us to stay in touch if we had wanted
Yeah.
to. But anyway, because I moved a lot, I never really established long-term friendships. And for me, it was more like just people kind of came and went. And it
Mhm.
was more friendships for convenience sake, almost like I'm
Mhm.
going to be here. I need somebody to be my friend. And so I have, as an adult, still struggled with who who's a friend? Are you a friend? Are you an acquaintance? Like, I always feel weird about that, about even just calling someone a friend. And so when you
Yeah.
talk about the friendship breakup, in my mind, I haven't had a lot of those. But that's also, I wonder if I'm that person you're talking about who you're like, boy, I haven't heard from that person in a while. They've ghosted me, because I don't know if I do that because I don't know that I even know that we're friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I totally get that. I totally get that. And it's funny you say that, because like my wife, she is the kind of person where she calls everybody her friend. Right. And so like when we were planning our wedding some years ago, and working on the invite list, she was like, oh, we got to invite this person and we got to invite that person. And I'm just like, who are these people? I've never met them. And she's like, they're my friends. And then I'd ask, well, when was the last time you spoke to them? And she'd be like, oh, it's been a few years. And I'm like, that's not your friend. Like if you haven't spoken to that, and it doesn't have to be like a deep conversation, but if you haven't like, I feel like if you haven't had consistent communication, even if it's like a quick check-in, like every 6 months or something like that. Cause I also understand like people move, right? Like we just moved a little over a year ago and some of our really close friends are out of state. And so we don't talk to them every day or every week, but we send memes back and forth, like there's still like a channel of communication that's open. But these are people that like she met once at somebody's porch party and she thought they were really cool and now she wanted to invite them to our wedding. I was just like, we're not paying $100 for these people to
No
come eat
porch
at our
party
wedding.
people.
Yeah. So, but I think you make a good point, right? That it's like, how do we define friendship? Like, where's the boundary line between an acquaintance or a colleague and an actual friend? And I tend to consider that line to be shared, like not a certain number of shared experiences, but like shared experiences that create deep emotional connections, right? And so you could call it trauma bonding if you want, but it's first of all, without any kind of shared experience, like you're just not going to develop like any kind of intimacy with anyone, like any kind of emotional intimacy, I think. And then the deeper the emotional connection in that moment, and the more you have those types of experiences with the same person or with the same people, I think that's what kind of creates a friendship. Because I think when you get to the point where the emotional connection is so deep that you are forced to rely on the other person to provide some kind of emotional support, um, that's what creates bonds, right? Because that's when you know that people are there for you, that they can support you, that they can sustain you, that they care. And so without that, I don't know that I can call someone a friend. Like it's just someone I met or an acquaintance or someone in my network, like I wouldn't necessarily call someone a friend without that kind of experience.
Oh, Taina. See, this is also challenging. And I just feel like the universe is talking to me because belonging has been something that's been coming up a lot for me in different
Mhm.
spaces, and friendship and all of this and vulnerability about you can't have belonging without vulnerability
Mhm.
and friendship. That idea of like friendship, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to ask for help, to allow others to hold you, to support you. And that may be another reason why I don't feel like I've really had friendships. I've never felt that sense of belonging. I didn't really have
Mhm.
familial belonging, and I haven't had those kinds of friendships that have developed. And so I've never really felt that feeling. And then that leads to this place of distrust. Well, not distrust, but just not feeling like I can trust. That sounds like distrust, but not feeling that safety or comfort to trust people. And you have to
Yeah.
have trust to be able to build, to have vulnerability, but also you kind of have to be vulnerable to build trust. So there's like
Yeah.
this weird catch-22 that sometimes it
Mhm.
just feels easier to not do any of it. And you also
Mhm.
mentioned that you have to see a friend or talk to a friend in a year or whatever, or they're not really a friend. I know you're talking about the porch party friends. That's different. But like,
Mhm.
I also wonder about introverted friendship because I'm so deeply introverted. I hate small talk. I don't like phone calls at all. There's so much about the way I
Yeah.
show up in the
Yeah.
world that I can easily go a year, even 2 years and not talk to someone and still think of them as a very good friend. Are they? Right? Like I just don't know. And like, would you consider us friends?
Yeah, I would consider us friends. I would definitely consider us friends. And
But
so
we've
I
never
think
met
that
in real life. We've
we've never
never
met in real life. Yeah.
physically
Yeah.
touched. We've never been in the same space.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think the way that the pandemic shifted how people connect, like I made some really amazing friends during the pandemic, online friends some of whom I have not met in person yet, and some of whom I have. And I think that when I said, you haven't like consistently communicating with people, right? Like because I'm also introverted, right? And so, like I'm so introverted that I remember once I had two roommates at the time, but they were hardly ever home because they had really big families. And so they were always like at a brother's house or a sister's house or at their parents' house. And I had just recently lost my job and I didn't have a car. So I was in the apartment alone for most of the days. And every once in a while I'd go out, but I remember like I went an entire like 3 or 4 days without ever uttering a word. And then somebody called. This was before texting and social media was as big as it is now, where it's like, don't call me, just DM me on Instagram or send me a text message. But somebody called, and when I answered the phone, I was like, oh my God, that's my voice. Like it was jarring to hear my voice again. And so I understand the whole thing about like, I'm not going to like talk to you regularly. But I think there has to be some type of like communication, right? And so I think if you've already done the deep emotional bonding stuff, and then one of you moves away, or something happens where you're no longer sharing space together the way that you normally would be, you can go weeks, months without talking to that person and just send them like a funny meme every now and again. And then when you do see them, it's like you pick back up like as if no time has gone by. And I have a friend who I kind of call her my soulmate because we're so alike in terms of like I don't see her very often because she lives out of state. But we used to be roommates for a little while. Like, and when I say roommates, I mean like we shared a room, we shared a bed. Like it wasn't like sexual at all. It was just like, oh, this is just what it is. And whenever we travel together, we just get one room and one bed. Like that's the kind of relationship we have. And we're both so introverted that like we'll make plans to like spend the day together and we will hardly talk. Like we'll go get brunch and we'll talk a little bit at brunch. Then we'll go to the stores to like, TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Home Goods, whatever. Then we might go back to like her place or my place and we'll just sit around reading or watching TV or taking a nap. Like there's hardly any conversation that happens. But it's because we're just so comfortable in each other's presence. Like we don't feel the need to fill the space with talk, with meaningless talk. And we're okay with the quiet. Like there's this sense of comfort of just having the other person's presence. And this is the kind of friend who we've done the deep emotional bonding, right? Like she's been there for me in so many ways. I've been there for her. And, and it feels safe to just be with her, right? Without this expectation of we have to be talking nonstop or it has to be like this type of fun out there energy. Like we can just like chill and relax and like decompress. And so, I think that, it's different for everybody. It's based on your personality and like what types of interactions with your friends are gonna help you feel safe. I think that's what, as individuals, we have to figure out. But I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I went on a podcast a while back called Friendship IRL with Alex Alexander, I think's her name. And we talked about introverted friendship, and she's an extrovert. And so she had such a different understanding, view of what friendship looked like than I did. And it was really interesting talking about it because I think so much of the view of what we get of what friendship's supposed to be or what makes a friendship is like from shows like Friends and other places. Like what we see on TV is always this very extroverted vision of friendship for good reason, I suppose, because it would be pretty boring to watch a show of two people who are sitting in the same room reading books and not talking, right? Like that's not very entertaining. But so much of what we see presented in popular culture about friendship is like best friends, people who go out together, they talk all the time, they're on the phone while they're walking to work all the time. Like it's just this like constant interaction and living together and always doing fun stuff and laughing and whatever. Like it just is this very extroverted vision of
Yeah.
friendship. And so I grew up seeing that and thinking that's what friendship was supposed to look like, which is why I always sort of thought I didn't have friends because I didn't have that
Hmm.
model of friendship. And what I've started to realize, I think I do have a lot of friends. I just have introverted friendships and those
Yeah.
look very different. So I think the important thing is to know how you show up in the world and maybe finding friendships with people who either show up the same way or who can respect that you aren't wired for extroverted friendships. And what does that mean if you're an
Yeah.
introvert? And if you're an extrovert, to notice if you have friends who are more introverted, because I think that they can take it very personally if they don't hear from you for a while, or if they,
Yeah.
right, because their vision of friendship is that like we talk every day, why don't you want to take my phone call, like all of that. So I think that part, that shared values, or at least the respect of each other's ways of showing up, to me
Hmm.
is what makes a friendship and one that works. And it's been like truly, talk about late in life, like it's in my 40s that I finally was like, I guess I do have friends and that I need to give it more credit. Because I think I always sort of look, and there's this always this part of me too that's like, do they think we're friends?
Hmm.
Like, is this like, because it's an awkward, weird thing to try and make friends and then to like
Yeah.
broach that subject and like be like, are we like, is this a friendship or is this like an acquaintance? And like,
Hmm.
are we collaborators or are we friends? You know? And so
Hmm.
it is a weird, and I know after being on that show, the people that reach out to me, like I think most adult people, that's why so many people I think also kind of lean on their friendships from all throughout their life, like their child,
Yeah.
because those are solid. They know that they're friends, like they know what it is. Because finding new friends and making new friends as an adult and then like getting that clarity around friendship as an adult is awkward AF. It is like dating and it's really uncomfortable for people.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm glad you brought that up because I think when you're a child, like, and you meet people, you're either going to be friends or you're not, right? There's no other reason for you to be interacting with that individual. But when you grow up and you're an adult, like, there are multiple reasons why you could be interacting with someone. It could be work, it could be your children are on the same sports team or in the same class, it could be your neighborhood association, right? Like, and so the boundary between knowing someone and becoming a friend gets wider as you get older because you're just like, okay, where at what point do we cross that line between just knowing each other for reasons A, B, and C and actually being friends? And I think also as you get older, like, you don't have as much time, like there's
Yes.
responsibilities, if
Especially
you
once
have
you have
kids.
kids, but even if you don't, but like
Yeah.
that's the thing, because you say like if you don't talk for a while, I'm like, there will be times where just stretches of months have gone by and I'm like, how did that happen that I haven't reached out to like my best friend was just visiting me from out of state. We see each other twice a year. Usually our families get together. And even that, because now that we have kids, it's occupied by a lot of kid time. And then in
Mhm.
between that, like we don't like we'll sometimes send funny Instagram reels because that's one place we both are both hiding out and we'll send things that way. We text occasionally, but like we can go a good part of the 6 months between visits without a lot of communication. And it's just like, thankfully, we're in the same life circumstances. So we both know, like, we're
Mhm.
just so flippin' busy and tired.
Yeah.
Friendships are hard when it's like that. And even if you don't
It
have kids, it's
is.
hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I don't have kids. I have two dogs that take turns being sick because they're old. and, and wouldn't you know it, every time we're getting ready to go out of town is also when they decide to be sick. But I digress. But yeah, but there's also just like work stuff, just general life stuff. Like you're just exhausted from just like life in general. Like the older you get, like there's so much emotional work labor that you have to do as an adult. And that makes it hard to find the energy, the emotional energy to connect with people. And one thing that I was just thinking, like, kids usually when they make friends, it's because they have a shared interest in something, right? Like they might be playing on the playground and both want to do the monkey bars, if that's even still a thing. Um, or they might be on the same sports team, right? Or they might both like the same book or something, you
These
know?
days they like the same video game or the same YouTuber.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, because I'm going back to all analog stuff over here. But yeah, and so I think, you know, as an adult, if you're listening and you're having trouble making friends, right, no matter your age, I think making sure that you spend time focusing on your hobbies is then it's not only is it an act of self-care for you, right, to like help make sure that you are taking time out to like do something that isn't quote unquote productive, you know, but I think it's also an easy way to meet people and make friends if that is something that you want to do. And I tend to think of friendships as like tiers of friendships. Like I remember, did you ever watch the Mindy Show or the Mindy Project?
Mindy Project? Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So do you remember that episode? It was like early in season 1 where she's talking about her best friends and Danny, the enemies to lovers colleague that she shares office space with. He was like, what do you mean you're best friend? I thought this other person was your best friend. You can't have more than one best friend. And she's like, best friend isn't a person, Danny. It's a tier, you know? And so like,
It's like
I think
S-tier.
Right. So I think of friendship like that, like there are different tiers of friendship, right?
Taina, it feels very hierarchical. I'm very surprised.
It does feel hierarchical in some ways. You could think of it as like concentric circles, right? Spheres of friendship.
There we go.
As
I like
opposed to
that.
tiers.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And so there's, you know, the closer those circles get to you, like the more intimate those relationships are, right? The deeper the friendships are. And so I think we also just sometimes fail to understand that. And so we might put expectations on not just other people, but ourselves on how to interact with someone without realizing that like, oh, they're not in my inner circle. So I shouldn't try to engage with them in this way, or they are in my inner circle, so I should be trying to engage with them in a specific way, right? But without that clarity, like it can be tough, and that takes inner work, you know, that takes time for you to figure out like who are my people.
It reminds me, and I wish I could, and I just tried to do a quick search and couldn't find it. Maybe you'll know. But there was some guy, I'm sure it was a white guy, who said that any person can only have like 200 people, 200 friends or 200 people in the world that they can actually keep up with. And I remember I read it probably in Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, because I remember reading that book, and then that sort of sent me down this journey with Facebook, which I have now like basically left. I keep it only so I can look at Marketplace, but and I was like, at that time I had like 1,000 friends on Facebook. I didn't even know who half them were, right? Like they were just people that I kind of accumulated over the years because it was like this default to just friend somebody on Facebook. And I was like, I took it to heart and was like, I want to see if I can get my friendship list down to 200 people. And over time I did, but it was really hard. It was like, oh, I have to let go of this person. But then I had these conversations with myself of like, I don't know, like I don't talk to this person. Like I'm barely engaging with any of their stuff. And just helped me to like sort of see just what you were talking about made me think of like, we only have so much capacity, any of us. So like, for those deep friendships, most people are only able to have a handful of those to have that kind of capacity. And then as you go out on those concentric circles, like you're giving less and less, and each one you might have a few more in that group. But even so, all told, you're not gonna be able to have more than, I think 200 feels unrealistic too, but you know, dozens or whatever it looks like for each person that you're gonna have. I wanted to mention before I forget too. that I did my like most viral TikTok, which, it's not that viral because I'm not that viral. But the first time I ever had one go kind of viral was me sitting on the toilet while my son was in the shower or in the bathtub. And I said, like, let's talk about why it's so hard to make friends as an adult. Like, why is it so hard to do this? It's like impossible. It feels like to make friends. And that thing had like 70,000 comments I couldn't keep up. And
Oh,
it was the
wow.
thing that got me like the followers I have on TikTok. It was all these people saying like, yeah, it's so hard to make friends as an adult. And like the awkward, like, are we friends now? And like, where do you even meet people? And so I love what you said about interests. And then I also wonder how many people are like me and maybe just aren't giving enough credit to the people that they already have in the world,
Yeah.
and like making an intentional effort to deepen those relationships that you might be seeing as an acquaintance or maybe are an acquaintance, but like you could make it into a friendship with some intentionality.
Yeah.
We have to get past the awkwardness of saying like, honestly, like I think even just saying, do you want to be my friend? It feels so awkward, but I can't tell you the number of times I have done that kind of thing, whether it was that explicit or something close to it. Most people meet you with like, oh my God, thank you. Like, because everyone else I have learned, not everyone, but most people, it seems like, are struggling with the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And if do you want to be my friends seems a little too like on the nose, you could say, hey, do you want to hang out? Like, do you want to get coffee? Like, and just see where it goes. See
Yeah,
where it
that's what I
goes.
usually do.
Yeah. Have you ever had like a friendship breakup?
I've had one big one, but it's interesting. Well, I've had a few big ones actually, but it's interesting because you were mentioning ghosting and stuff. And then I'm like, well, if we look at it that way, I mean, I feel like almost everyone I've ever been friends with, because I only have a handful of people that have been consistently in my life for any amount of time.
Mhm.
I feel like most people kind of are these shorter lived friendships for me, which mirrors again my childhood. So it makes sense. But I wonder how many of those people thought it was me breaking up the friendship by
Mm.
ghosting, and me
Yeah.
feeling like they didn't respond to that one email, so I'm not going to be the next, because I can get pretty tit for tat and that kind of stuff, because
Hmm.
I don't want to seem too vulnerable, too
Yeah.
eager,
Yeah.
too annoying. I don't want to be a burden, all that kind of stuff. So like if I reach out, they don't reach back. Sometimes I'm done because I'm like, I don't want to be the one, and maybe they were busy. So I don't know. I wonder, like, you just make me wonder
Mm.
how how many hearts have I broken over the years, where I'm like, oh shit, those people thought it was me who ghosted them, all the while I was thinking that they
Yeah.
didn't want to be my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be not that you should do this, but I think it would just be interesting to go back and be like, hey, remember when that happened? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
because
if
there's a
dredging up
million
the
of those.
past.
It feels like such a common trope for a rom-com movie where some guy goes or woman goes back to like the loves that they had to
Hmm.
see why it ended or whatever. I would love to see that with, to pass the Bechdel test of like, can we just do it where it's about women exploring their friendships over the
Yeah.
years and no
Yeah.
men involved at all? But anyway, as far as big friendship breakups, I have had a few, like going back to I can remember my first best friend that I remember from high school, that friendship broke up because she got pregnant while we were in high school.
Mm.
And I did not have the emotional intelligence at 17 or 18 to be there and support her, or to understand
Hmm.
how, like, I couldn't wrap my brain around how I was going to remain friends with somebody who had a kid. Like,
Hmm.
I can't relate to that. What will we do?
Yeah.
I feel shitty. I mean, honestly, most of my big friendship breakups, I feel like I have a lot of the blame to take in it, and
Mm.
just me not being ready. So, yeah, that one was tough. But I was young and
Yeah.
immature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had a big friend, like my biggest best friend breakup happened through a divorce, right? And I think that's pretty
Mm.
common too, where people in divorces, you lose friends. It just happens.
Mm.
People choose sides. They don't feel
Yeah.
like they can be friends with both people. In this case, I felt like my best friend, and she would have a different interpretation of what happened, I'm sure. I doubt she'll hear this, but if she happens to listen to it, I want to make sure that I honor the fact that I know that there are two sides to every story. But at the
Hmm.
time, the way I felt was very judged, and like, because I had lost a lot of weight because I was very
Hmm.
depressed. But externally, for people who don't understand, that might seem like I was like feeling great about having lost all this weight. And I mean, I was
Hmm.
proud of my body at the time, but I was depressed. I was in a bad place. And
Hmm.
I felt this reaction of like, oh, you think you're so great now, or oh, you're just leaving him because you think you look, I mean, literally I heard her, she said something like, are you just leaving him because you look good in a swimsuit now or something like, and that, and again, two sides to every story, but so that I didn't feel supported, and I didn't feel like I felt like I wasn't chosen in that breakup of the relationship. So things like that happen too, where you have a breakup and then
Yeah.
suddenly you realize, or like going through something really big in your life and seeing who's there for you and who's not, or how they show
Yeah.
up. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, I came out late in life in my early 30s. And at that point, a lot of the really intimate friendships that I had through the church that I was going to at the time, that I had been going to for over a decade. And so, um, when I came out and I started to have those conversations with people, um, there were two general reactions, right? Like one was, oh, I don't care. Like, you're my friend, whatever. Who you choose to love, like that's who you choose to love. Like, I can't judge you for that. Like, I and then the other reaction was from a very small handful of people, just like, well, we love you anyway, and like that kind of like almost pity kind of reaction. And so that was kind of like heartbreaking to endure a little bit. But even beyond that, like even after that, I should say, like we would still hang out. Like like they met my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, like when we first started dating, like, and all of that. But then as the years went on, like it just became clear that we had less and less in common. And so it was one of those, like, again, like just the slow drifting apart. That after a while it was like, oh, we haven't talked in a while. And not just we haven't talked in a while, but like we haven't texted, we haven't spoken, haven't seen, haven't sent any kind of like Instagram meme or whatever. And it also felt like I was doing the majority of like the heavy lifting in terms of like reaching out and like trying to connect. And so I was like, I'm just going to stop doing that and then see what happens. And I stopped doing it, and we just stopped talking. But there are some friendships that like am embarrassed to say that like I'm the one who like fucked things up. And so I remember, and this is going to sound really silly in hindsight, but in high school I had a really good friend, and I remember I had a crush on this boy, and I like wrote out my feelings in a letter. And then she was like, "Are you going to give it to him?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And then like I crumpled it up and threw it away. And she was like, "Can I read it?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "I'm going to get it from the trash so I can read it." And I was like, "No, please don't." And she just kept insisting that she was going to read this like deeply personal letter. And finally I was like, "If you read that letter, I will never talk to you again." And she was like, "Oh, whatever." And I never spoke to her again. Like, I was like, it just felt like such a betrayal of like trust, such a violation, that I was just like, yeah, that's it. We're done. Like, I'm just not going to talk to you again. And then there are other, friendship breakups that I'm responsible for, that I was just emotionally immature and just acted like a total asshole to people. And looking back, I'm like, oh, I wish I could make things right, but there's no way to go back and make things right,
I've tried. With that best friend that I mentioned, I wrote her a letter and didn't hear back. And then I have reached out to some other folks because after my brother died and when I got divorced, I was in a really bad spot, and some of my friendships fell apart from that. And I tried to fix some of those things later. And I think sometimes it's too far gone and things are uncomfortable. But then, like the best friend I was saying, by the way, she's my best friend. I'm not her best friend, and that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason that person is my best friend, because she was there through the time that I lost a lot of friends because of my bad behavior, because I was in a bad place. I was in a dark, depressed space where I was acting really poorly and
Mm-hmm.
not handling things well. And I was much too old to be acting the way I was in my mid 30s. And she stuck by me through it and
Mm-hmm.
understood where I was and what I was going through. But that's not easy to do. I've been on the other side
Yeah.
of that, and it's not easy to do. So like, I don't fault the people who don't either, because I was horrible to be around. So I can understand why people wouldn't. But the ones who
Mm-hmm.
do are amazing. So like, I also think sometimes we have to release ourselves from the shame around where
Yeah.
we've messed up our friendships, because in that time I messed up friendships. I wasn't a great friend in many ways to a lot of people. And I could hold on to that and be like embarrassed or shamed about it, or just say like, I was going through something. Because often when we're a bad friend, there's a reason. Like if
Mm-hmm.
we are hurting, hurt people, or we haven't developed the emotional maturity that we need to yet. And we can't be ashamed of that. That just means we weren't emotionally mature, and then
Yeah.
we worked on those things and became that, right? So I think we have to release some of that shame around being a
Yeah.
bad friend.
Yeah. I think, I think what it all boils down to is like, and it goes back to what you said about like watching how friendship is portrayed on TV. And that really sets us up to have expectations on what it means to be a friend and how to behave like a friend, not just on other people, but ourselves. And we really have to release ourselves and other people from those expectations and understand that one, we're all flawed, right? So we're all going to mess it up at some point. Um, and two, that like, that's okay. Like, it's okay for people to be flawed and still be in relationship, still be in friendship with people who are flawed. Like, um, there's a certain level of like grace that we have to have for people and for ourselves as we navigate how to be in relationship with people that we're not shown sometimes through media, through reality TV, like through things like that. And so, and every friendship is not going to be like the time of your life. You know what I mean? Like there are those like slow, steady friendships that like can really sustain you. And then there are those friendships that every time you hang out, it's a wild story, that you have to tell someone or whatever. And so, and just letting people be who they are like that and letting yourself be who you are and what you need out of that relationship is so important.
I think that piece too, what we both just shared around releasing the shame and having grace, I think that's part of why I think talking about relationships and friendships specifically as part of a podcast that's focused on liberation still is really aligned. Like it might seem like when you're talking about friendships, what does that have to do with this idea of liberating ourselves from oppressive systems? But I think part of it is like, to me, it's twofold. I'd be interested to hear if you think there's more. But one, I think community, learning how
Mm-hmm.
to have community, how to open yourself up vulnerably to trust and to share and to be able to let people in and allow people to care for you is part of that collective care and part of creating communities that allow us to create collective change. So friendships are vitally important in
Mm-hmm.
that. They don't all have to be friendships. Some of it can be other kinds of relationships that you use, but I think friendships are a really important piece of building your village that helps with
Yeah.
that collective part of change. And that's one part. And I think the other piece is all of the fucked up ideas that we have about friendship and how those things are given to us, and how I think so much of it looks different for men and women also, which we didn't really get into. As women,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about what female friendships look like, but I think men are given a very different vision of what friendship is. In fact, one that I think in some ways is more healthy, and other ways I think is less healthy.
Yeah.
But anyway, these differences. And so the things that we're told about what friendship needs to be, and then how we make it a problem with ourselves when it doesn't measure up to that vision
Mm-hmm.
that we've been given. And so I think freeing ourselves from that feels very liberatory too, and part of this process of saying, I'm done with these systems. So I just want to point that out, that like this, almost anything we could talk about, by the way,
Yeah.
can come back to this, but I think it's important to keep driving it home, because I just want people to keep hearing everything is political. Everything is part of liberation. All of the things, parts of our lives, there is work to be done inside of that, of how do I start to look at this in a way that is more liberatory.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And we've talked about this in other episodes where one of the insidious things about capitalism is that there's this toxic individuality that it breeds, right? It's like this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like just push your way through it, like just, keep moving on, keep hustling, etc. And so we are raised in this culture where the individual is like above everyone else, right? Your individual needs, your individual assertions, your individual ambitions. And not that those things aren't important, but learning how to be in friendship and in community with people is in direct resistance to that toxic individualism, right? Being able to allow yourself to be vulnerable with other people and lean on other people to support you, and vice versa, and you supporting other people, right? That is how we resist that toxic individualism. That is how we resist that toxic capitalism that we're kind of forced to operate on a day-to-day level. And one thing that when I was teaching that I used to tell my students is like, because they would just be like, we'd learn about all these things, right? Because I was teaching intro to women's gender and sexuality studies, and they'd just be like overwhelmed with like how awful things felt after learning all of that. And I was like, look, like, no, we're not going to liberate ourselves in one day, right? And we're not going to liberate ourselves completely, and we're not going to liberate ourselves alone. And so it's not about trying to do all the things to get free. It's not about, trying to do it as quickly as possible or on your own, but it's how far away can you lean from those toxic systems? Like how far away can you push, or how far can you push against them, right? Because unless there's like a radical revolutionary moment in time sometime soon, like you and I are probably not going to see like the liberation of all people across the planet, right? Like that seems insane to even think about that as happening in our lifetimes. But how much can we resist on any given day? And how much can we resist in the community of other people on any given day? And the way that we do community and friendships is a really, really big part of that. Like my retirement plan is to buy a house on several acres of land where me and my besties can all live and take care of each other, right? Because some of us don't have kids by choice, and some of us do have kids. Like some of my besties do have kids, and that is what we've decided to do. Like
Well, having kids is no guarantee, by the way, that they're going to take care of you. My brother died, right? Like we don't know what's going to happen. And so, yes, I'd like to live on your commune if I can, because I want to find one. And we are, talking about resisting and pushing against, like, if you think of oppression and our liberation from it as like pushing against a boulder that we've got to get up a hill. Like if you try to do it alone, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
It's going to run you over, in fact. And the only way we can do it is when we work together, and we work together in a coordinated way. And we can't do that if we aren't able to see each other and care for each other. And so like building friendships is important. And this is from somebody who's an introvert and thinks of herself as a pretty lone wolf. I am working on it, and I think it is really important. So I'm glad we talked about this, and I'm glad that we have officially decided that we're friends. I think maybe we both thought we were, and I talked about you as my friend to my kid, but now I can officially say we're friends.
We're friends. We're
Yay.
Friends. Yeah.
And guess
definitely.
what, people? Those of you listening who are like me, you may have more friends than you know. You just got to give it more credit and like be willing. I think my biggest takeaway, I want to know yours. Maybe we should do this every episode. But my biggest takeaway is to be daring, to do that thing that's a little scary, to reach out to that person that you find cool and just say, hey, I think you're cool. Or that person that you've talked to a few times, but you don't really know if you're friends, and say like, are we friends? Or, hey, you want to hang out again? Like to be daring, because I think that's how you end up finding those friendships and getting them. What about you? What's your takeaway from today?
My biggest takeaway is that I think I just need to try a little bit harder. Like I am really good at like sending the memes. Like I'm the meme queen. Like I will send you memes all day, but I will hardly ever like call or text people.
Well, listen, Taina, I just
So
want you to know from me, don't ever call me. I hate when people call me. You can text me, don't call me. But the memes are awesome and they mean a lot. I sent you one yesterday and I was like, I don't know why. I just saw it. It made me laugh so hard. It was the little kitty getting run over by the vacuum cleaner, which was horrible, but it was just something about it was so funny because the dog's reaction was like, what? And I don't know why, but I was like, I just feel like you're going to enjoy this. So I sent it to you. And I don't know that I normally send you a lot of memes. So, or whatever. Is that a meme? Reels, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's like one of my love languages. So send them to me and I'll send them to you.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Sounds good.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Friend.
Yes.